Communication and Technology Committee will now come to order. Madam Chair, Clerk, can you please take the attendance?
Chairman Hoidinga.
Here. Representatives Johnson.
Here.
Wozniak.
Here.
Coleman.
Here.
Shurkin.
Here.
I'm sure you have a quorum.
Thank you. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the last committee meeting. Motion made by Representative Wozniak. Seeing no objection, the minutes are approved. So today we have on the agenda HB 4801 by Representative Riley. And if he could come up at this time, and I think he was going to bring a staff with him. Thank you.
Madam Chairman and members of the Communication and Technology Committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify in support of my legislation, House Bill 4801, which would require social media companies be content neutral and viewpoint neutral if that is how they represent themselves to the users. I cannot emphasize that qualification enough. This is a bill that is going to be misunderstood and misrepresented, even by those with good intentions, because it's just an easy detail to pass over, but it's an absolutely critical distinction. This only applies to platforms that purport to be neutral. This is not a question of property rights and what a company may or may not do with its website. This is a question of fraud, of companies misleading their literally millions of customers and business partners, and indeed in doing so, causing them real harm. This is a very complicated issue, so I appreciate you giving me the time to lay the foundation to provide some background before going into the policy issues and the legal issues we're dealing with here. Today, the public square is the internet. It's where you go to meet people, it's where you go to get the news, it's where you go to share your opinions, and it's where you sell your merchandise. You may think that the issue of free speech on the internet is about political speech, but it's much more than that. It's about all kinds of speech. It's about commercial speech. Not long ago, I had no idea how many people make money on the internet or how they do so. A couple of months ago, I was chatting with an owner of a brewery locally in Oxford, and I just presented him a tribute, and he had only been in business a couple of years. And so I asked him how he was able to promote his this business because they're doing so well. How did he make a name for himself? He said it was all social media. That is the way everyone is doing it now. They buy ads and they pay to promote their posts. This is called boosting towards people that live in the area so that they can see all the good times people are having there. He said all of it was but that's just one way people use social media to make money. And it's most similar to traditional types of advertising. On YouTube, people make money directly from the consumption of their content. People that make videos for YouTube can enter into revenue sharing agreements where YouTube runs ads before and during their videos, and they receive a portion of their advertising revenue from the viewers. People also make money by finding sponsors for their content. They might be similar to a radio program where the host will promote a product on the air, or in some cases, a YouTuber will actually just raise money directly from his or her viewers. Websites such as Patreon also allow people to support content creators financially, either as a simple donation or in exchange for some kind of premium, like additional content or merchandise. Content creators can also receive contributions from viewers during a live broadcast. During these live broadcasts, viewers can often participate in a live chat, typically moderated by the broadcaster. Viewers can pay money to send what they call a super chat, where the message is displayed prominently and the host of the program can encourage them by reading them on air. For example, one YouTube channel features an attorney commenting on various legal topics. He has several thousand viewers watching the live broadcast, which is pretty amazing when you think of it. It's a full auditorium worth of people. And viewers will pay him to read their comments on air, adding up to hundreds of dollars every night. And this YouTuber says the major tool he uses to promote his YouTube channel is Twitter. So you can see people actually earn a living on the internet and often depend on multiple outlets to do so. This example only scratches the surface. One of the most rapidly growing commercial sectors online is esports, basically video game sports. I know, it sounds crazy to me too. How could video games ever become a sport the way real sports are sports? And the answer is, it's for the fans. Video games become popular with kids 30 years ago. This is a generation of adults that played them as much or more than physical sports when they were children. And as spectators, whether it's watching a football game on television or watching Leagues of Legends on Twitch, it's the same essence of watching teams compete. And now we're seeing an entire industry develop around esports, the way it developed around professional sports. Contracts, sponsorships, merchandise deals, everything. Just to give you one example of how far this industry has already grown, the League of Legends World Championship in 2018 had over 200 million concurrent viewers during the finals. I couldn't believe it when I heard there was 200 million concurrent viewers, but that's what Wikipedia says. We're seeing all kinds of ways that people used to do business now being done on the internet. These are multi-million-dollar industries. All this to say, there is real money to be made on social media. We aren't just talking about people standing on a soapbox. We're talking about people that have created businesses around their social media followings. And often there is no distinction between users and business partners. When you first created your Facebook page, you probably thought you would only use it to communicate with friends and families. But years later, you connected to hundreds of people on the internet, and you realize you can actually sell things to people. You can start a podcast. Soon you'll be making money. You're growing an audience. People find you on Twitter. And then one day, you say something a platform deems offensive, and instantly you're banned, shut out from your customers. The question about how social media companies serve content to their viewers are not only all confined to politics, although they arise as well. But as much as we might like to think that politics is the issue, the vast majority of consumer and producer of social media content are not political at all. It's business, and sometimes it's personal. So let's go over what censorship on social media looks like. As you probably know, it happens all the time. The stories are countless. There's something new every day. Just today, I heard of an incident where Facebook censored a feminist satire website. Facebook sent the creator of the website a message saying the website, reductress.com, would have reduced distributions, quote, because of repeated sharing of clickbait. Clickbait typically means a headline intended to get people to click on it, which is what pretty much every website tries to do. The owner of the site got an explanation from Facebook on one of her headlines. It was, wow, this ethical brand only sells one t-shirt, but they really worked hard on it. That was their justification for suppressing a website traffic, harming their bottom line, that one of their web headlines was written to attract visitors. There was a story on Monday where the video website Vimeo removed 3 videos from a prominent book author. And when pressed, the representative from Vimeo says they would generally remove videos that have a, quote, an overall mean-spirited vibe. There's a picture emerging here. These sites basically do whatever suits them, with absolutely zero concern for how their censorship impacts their users. First and foremost, we need to observe that a social media platform's goal, its natural objective, is not to provide a content-neutral platform. It's to provide a platform desirable to its users in such a way as to be most profitable. And there's inherently nothing wrong with that. That's admirable, actually. If indeed that is how social media companies genuinely operate in service to the profit motive. But even assuming this is true, that social media companies are only doing what their users want, the question becomes, are they truthfully representing this to their users and to their partners? This is where we get to the real meat of the issue. Users only ever get as much information on how their content is published as the network chooses to give them. Sometimes the information is clear, you're banned. We know what that means. But networks never really tell people who see their content, how, or why. Facebook will say so many people saw your post, but you have no meaningful way to verify it. And certainly no way to tell exactly or approximate cause for the number. So there exists a great potential for what is called shadow banning, where a platform lets a user go on merely posting, not informing him that they are suppressing his post and nobody sees them. And they can do this to any degree. They can make it so you think you're posting publicly when you're completely invisible. Or they can do it more subtly. Maybe you make a post and wonder, why shouldn't I be getting more responses? Usually I get more responses. And you never know. Maybe the post didn't catch people's interest, or maybe you never saw it, or maybe they never saw it in the first place. The worst thing about shadow banning is that nobody can prove it is happening to them. We only know about it because of leaks and admissions from companies. It certainly has occurred to the social networks that they could manipulate public opinion by manipulating that their users, what their users get to see. This was actually a plot line in the political TV show House of Cards. But again, it's not just politics, it's commerce. It's picking winners and losers. It's deciding who can put food on the table. As I was saying, all kinds of real-world activities now have online counterparts. In real-world activities, you also have conflicts. You have broken contracts, you have consumer fraud, and you have injuries that in the real world go to a courthouse for remedy. But with these online counterparts, the social network is the judge and the jury. Our only legal system is way behind what is going on. So the start of being able to make a conflict resolution available for content creators is to give them the minimum legal foothold to be able to take platforms to task when they, despite claiming to be neutral, are actually anything but neutral. One of the issues here is that social media platforms claim immunity from liability for anything people post on their website. But then they also claim to have the privilege of a publisher in regarding to the content of their sites. But actually, even a publisher can't just instantly ban an author. Once an author has a contract, if for some reason things don't work out, the publisher can't just instantly destroy everything the author ever published. The balance of power between platform and user is absolutely not in balance at all. This bill is a first step, really a very small one, more of a foothold really, in establishing citizens' rights in a new public square. Now you might wonder how a state law like my bill would apply to a multinational platform. We see warning labels on products in Michigan asserting that this product is known to the state of California to cause reproductive harm. That's because California passed a law requiring this label, and the companies figured, well, let's just put these labels on everything. It's a lot simpler that way. You've probably noticed starting a few years ago, suddenly every time you visit a website, for the first time, a warning popped up saying the website uses cookies, and you had to click a box saying you consent to it. That's because of a European law. The bureaucrats imposed a rule requiring websites all over the world to do this if they do business in EU. Almost all American websites have at least a little traffic from Europe, so they make everyone sign it. Well, under my bill, a social media company that claims to be neutral wouldn't technically have to be neutral outside of Michigan, but they would have to show that their policies aren't harming people in Michigan. That's our right, our duty as a state to protect our consumers and our businesses. So in conclusion, the best way to understand social media is to think of it as something every bit as complicated as the real world, because everything in the real world happens on the internet in some way. People earn a living, people discuss their opinions, people sell products, people fall in love, people conspire against others, and people entertain themselves. And every bit as complex as the real world, yet we've essentially surrendered the governing of the digital world to a tiny number of private companies that are almost totally unaccountable to anyone, even the federal government. It should be alarming to every member of this committee that these companies see themselves as the benevolent rulers of what is a major part of everybody's life in every way. These companies are able to control the speech of their platforms and virtually no recourse for users harmed by their policies. And they resist even the smallest effort from our state government to simply hold them accountable to their own promises. All my bill does is spell out what should already be understood, that if you hold yourself out as a neutral platform, you have to be one. It's a simple matter of honesty to customers and business partners. And that ends my testimony. I'm not sure if you want Adam to speak next on his issue or field questions now. Or.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I work for Representative Riley, but I asked to testify this afternoon because I actually have some experience building and managing social networks. I actually did one. I don't say as I toot my own horn. It's actually not as complicated as they are made out to be. It's really just a matter of building a system that interacts with a database, and users just post and share content. And what I did over this period was I worked for an organization that saw a need to have their own self-contained social network where they had ownership of their own data, because one of the problems that any company has with a social network is you don't really have any control of your data. You don't have access to an email list of your Facebook friends and what have you. And this is a political group that wanted to have the ability for certain members to have access to a list of county members and or a list of members in their state or what have you. So we ended up building our own platform. And what ended up happening over the period of years as the administrator is you start to respond to the institutional incentives of the company that you work for, and you want to try to improve the experience for all users just the same way as these other platforms do. So I was actually involved in shadow banning before this was even a term that was well known to people. And the reason is because you have in any network a small percentage of users that cause problems for others, and you want to mitigate that. And there's certainly an argument to be made, for Facebook or what have you, that if you have users that are harassing others or they're posting pornography, then there's a remedy for that is reasonable. But what you find is, especially when you have a very small network, it's easy for certain users to get around being banned. So at some point the thought occurs to you, hey, if I ban this guy, he'll just create a new account with a new email address and get right back on and start causing problems again. What if instead, because I'm a software guy, I'll make it so that he thinks everyone is seeing his posts, but in reality, nobody but him is seeing his posts. All he'll know is he's posting things and no one's reacting to it, and maybe eventually he'll give up and walk away. And that's the genesis of where a lot of these kind of policies come from, is that, the loyalty to the company is the loyalty to the user experience as a whole. And in this case, we're talking a small organization. We were not, selling products online, so it didn't get to the extent where we're really committing retail fraud here. But the intention is essentially to have it both ways. On one hand, you want to be able to have all users having good experience. On the other hand, you want to have no users causing any trouble. So that's how institutionally you get to that point. And that's just to illustrate from my experience where this comes from. So with that, if you have any questions for me in particular, that's fine too, but I assume you'll direct most of your questions to the representative. But I did want to throw that in as someone that's actually kind of worked behind the scenes at a social network, that's where those things come from. So thank you.
Rep. Churkin, did you want to?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't want to interrupt the gentleman, but could you explain what shadow banning is? I've never heard that term before.
Well, shadow banning is when you're posting something, but you're not really, you have no way of knowing if that's going out to other people or not. And so the internet service company can actually keep your message from going out to other people, and you don't really even realize that. And they can tailor it depending on their algorithm, how much of your message is going out. So they can basically, you put a Facebook post up, and Facebook can decide, we're not going to let certain people see that post.
So if, as a legislator, I'm assuming you have a Facebook page, maybe you can answer this for me. I see people's posts. I think we have the option of hitting hide, and that means we can see the comments, but nobody else can. Would that be the same as the shadow banning, when we're hiding the comments on Facebook? I don't know.
Sure, except this is not you doing it yourself as a user.
Exactly.
Right. As a user, you have options to block others. So let's say there's someone you don't like who's causing trouble. You can say, I want to block this guy from my page. But separately from that, a social network can block your content and you're not aware of it.
Right.
Because there's no transparency to the users what they're doing. They just they'll tell you how many people have seen your post. They won't ever tell you why or whom exactly or anything like that, and you have no remedy to figure out what that is, other than potentially discovery in a lawsuit. But that's about it.
Did you have any questions? Rep. Coleman?
Thank you, Representative Riley, for being here, and to the other gentlemen. Certainly see the value in having this conversation, and it's concerning if their outreach and communications with others are being limited based on things like political viewpoint and opinions and those kinds of things. I'm not 100% convinced that this legislation is the answer, and my concern would be that we have two extremes here. We have a situation where maybe some folks are being banned or shadow banned or deplatformed on one end. On the other end, you have people who may be posting, violent images or obscene graphic content that we don't, obviously, probably most people don't want to see when they're scrolling on their feed or interacting with others. So, what I'm trying to contemplate here on this committee is how do we find the middle ground? And I wanted to kind of get your opinion on that, and where does your bill stand in that paradigm?
Well, first off, so my bill pertains, first off, in are you content neutral or not? So on one side, you could have somebody who said, yeah, we're not content neutral, and then they can basically they can curtail post or whatever they want, or they can as they see fit. So my bill basically says, but if you claim that you're content neutral, then you're going to have policies that are basically that you're going to be able to, probably going to have to let more stuff fly. Now there are federal laws that are there's certain things that you're not allowed to post online. So there's certain things that that there are federal laws that this legislation works with. And if you see the federal law, that this goes along with that. This does not stop those things from happening.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, and my concern is that I don't want to see us go from one extreme to the other. I want to make sure that people have the right to support political candidates or oppose government policy or promote their business, these kinds of things. But then again, I don't want social media sites or YouTube or these kinds of things to be forced into allowing content that might be, promoting violence or, sexual content, that kind of thing.
Yeah, once again, we have federal laws that speak to those issues.
How extreme do you think? So if your bill, say this passed the committee and the governor signed it and we got all the way through, what degree of change would that be?
Well, obviously,
where we're at today?
this is going to have to be up to the industry because they're the ones that would have to follow it. But I would think that they would tend to have to probably have a little bit more, they'd have to open things up to more comments that some people may consider to be offensive. So that would be typically what would happen, which would be the same as the public square we have now, right? With free speech, we're able to go and to say certain things, but there's certain things we can't say. So that I was thinking it would err in that way, but I don't know. I mean, industry would have to determine this.
And then one more follow-up, if I may. Thank you, Madam Chair. Two quick questions. One, do you know if other states have passed any similar legislation? Two, how do I put this? If this were passed, would it be the state of Michigan deciding what's allowed and what's not, or how would that be regulated? I'm kind of just and if was there any linchpin issue or moment, or did you have a constituent bring this to you, or was this something that you felt on the national scene needed to change? Well,
a constituent did not bring this to me, although you're going to hear some testimony today that I have a constituent this has been affected by. So that answers your first question. And then secondly, Yeah, this would be for the state of Michigan, but as was mentioned in my testimony, it would be up, they may decide to make universal policy across the nation based on what happens in Michigan.
If I could add. And just to add, all major networks have content policies that they're permitted to enforce on the site. The legislation pertains only to if they express that they are content neutral and viewpoint neutral, which is a standard that's applied in First Amendment law. So all they would have to do to comply with the bill is simply say we have a content policy and that is our policy and that is the entirety of our policy. So they still have every freedom to set what the policy is on their own site. They just have to honor whatever that commitment is that they make.
So at the federal level, we have the Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And then in Michigan, we would be changing the Michigan Consumers Protection Act. So those are two, yeah. Did you have one more, Rep. Shurkin?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Chairwoman. Representative Wiley, to my knowledge, and this is my own personal opinion, Facebook, Google, 8chan, other sites, Instagram and that, they're all private businesses, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so you're trying to regulate what they put on their businesses, on their platform, on their internet platform.
Well, again, it's to basically, the claims that they make, if they are saying that they're content neutral, they would, yeah, that would, then they'd have to make decisions on how if they say they're going to be content neutral, they would have to make decisions to go along with they'd have to make policies. Otherwise, people would end up suing them if they're not content neutral, I would imagine.
Okay. And I pulled my Facebook page up here, and there's a link in here. It talks about save link, hide posts, news for 30 days, unfollow a person, why am I seeing this post, find support and report posts, turn on notifications for this post. So would you agree with me that the individual Facebook user has a right to see what they want to see? And if they don't like a post, they can hide it.
That they can hide a post that they put, that somebody
else put that they found egregious or racial or whatever, for whatever reason.
You're saying an individual should be able to somehow...
No, they according to this, they can. Would you agree with me that they already can do that? The public.
The public can restrict... I don't understand the question.
Okay, well, I'll rephrase it then. On Facebook, they have a link that you can hit, and it gives 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 off the jump, 7 reasons that you can look or not look at a Facebook post. Okay, and so the public themselves can censor a post themselves if they find it distasteful or racial or whatever.
Right, you weren't agreeing with that, yes.
Okay, all right. Usually, government doesn't like to get into private businesses' business, I guess. But in this case, you feel that it's necessary.
Yeah, because what we're dealing with is a misrepresentation in the marketplace. I mean, that's why it's in this part of the law, consumer protection, and where we require people to have ethical conduct, and that's an important part. Deceptive. That's what the whole Consumer Protection Act is about being deceptive, and that's why it's in this part of the law.
I would agree with you to that length if I was selling something on Facebook and I was misrepresenting myself, if I was selling the object, but not for general posts from the public.
Well, see, that was the first part of my testimony. I was trying to make the point that the internet has grown. It's kind of an unusual thing what's going on. It's being a part of every part of our lives, whether somebody is actually making a living on the internet through posting on YouTubes or different ways. So it's actually entering into commerce in real ways.
Okay. My last question, and thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Does this cover all social media? Does your bill have the intent for every place that has a blog or a Facebook, a Twitter account, an Instagram. Is this your intent? Then it covers everything.
I'm not sure if, when you say all,
Anything that's social media that people put on this or their computer at home or at work.
I'm a little
it would be
reluctant to say all, because I'm not sure if I've covered all the, every detail, but what we're calling indirect, under the definitions here, this is what, if you look in the bill, the descriptions, under interactive computer services, that's what we're considering.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Representative Wozniak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to Representative Churkin's comments on the Facebook, I think your issue goes more to the platform, which is supposed to be neutral, but we're talking about a bias that is either impromptu, in other words, they see something coming in, they decide not to put it on the Facebook, or it's already predetermined by that platform that they're not going to put on certain things that do come in. Am I correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, I think that clearly then says there's some type of bias that could happen in a Facebook situation or any other platform, correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple more people to testify. So,
All right.
does anyone else had any more questions? Okay. At this time, Roy Langolf, Commander Dennis Hoffman, wishes to speak and supports the bill.
I'm Roy Langoff, and I'm from Village Funeral Home in Ortonville, small community, actually in constituent Riley's territory. In honor of our 10th anniversary, we chose to do a Facebook blog once a month of people in our community living their life well, and to share those stories within the community. And in the last 10 minutes, I've learned a lot already about what a neophyte I may be in the Facebook community. We posted our local VFW commander, Dennis Hoffman. We did the story on him. He's a Vietnam-era vet. He has worked closely with Representative Riley to make our community a Purple Heart community. We also recently had one of our local deputies passed away in the line of duty, and we now have his memorial highway running through our community, as well as the Purple Heart community designation. We're very small, north, about as far north in Oakland County as you can get without going into Lapeer and Genesee County. We posted his story of his Vietnam service time, which was just a factual story of what happened during his time and how he came about in Ortonville to be an advocate for our veterans, taking them to the Dingle Center, getting them benefits, and surprisingly, for as small as our community, Ortonville's about 900 people. How many Purple Heart veterans? I think we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50. It was a factual story. It was on Facebook. We went to boost it. We were denied. We appealed it. We're again denied based on it was too political. I've continually read the article that was written on behalf of a marketing person that I hired. I still don't see any politics in it. This happened, and he shared that. So interesting on your ghost banning, it's very possible that they could have posted this and boosted it, and I would have paid for it and would have never known that it wasn't being boosted. I mean, we're trying, what I'm trying to do in my community is build people's trust and their confidence in me and our staff, and also be a community advocate for information, whether it's about the local high school football game on Friday night, which we've posted, is an honor of the late Deputy Eric Overall, who was the first Oakland County Deputy Sheriff to be killed in probably roughly 70 years in the line of duty. That's all we're trying to do, but I'm trying to build a long-term trust and confidence. I'm not looking for dollars, but eventually it does affect my business if I'm being shut down on Facebook. So that's why I'm here in support of that bill, and I thank you for your time.
Okay, Rep. Churkin?
Sir, I appreciate what you and your business has done, and this is a really good gesture on your part. At any time when you were in contact with Facebook, did they ever bring up to you that if you paid them, they would post this on their webpage?
When you do boost a post, you do pay for it.
Okay.
Yes.
But you're saying they
Flat
did,
out denied the
but they denied it though.
They denied it.
And so wasn't one of none of your alternatives was to pay, if you paid for it, they'd put it on for you?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you.
And once again, thank you
You're
for
welcome.
this.
Thank you.
Thank you for that testimony. At this time, supporting the bill and wishing to speak, Katerina Claus. If you just push the red button in front of you, that'll turn the speaker on.
I
Thank
believe
you.
it is on. Dear members of the committee, my name is Katerina Claus, and I am a Michigan resident. Like many, if not most of my fellow Michigan citizens, I use social media to communicate with friends and family on a daily basis. I offer this testimony of my own experience with censorship on social media. Virtually everyone that uses social media has some familiarity with the censorship policies because they or someone they know has experienced censorship online in one form or another. Social networks are seen as hypersensitive and sometimes intolerant to the slightest infraction. I can provide two specific instances where my own statements were censored on social media, and not because they were obscene, violent, or inappropriate in the slightest. I was a student at Northern Michigan University in the summer of 2014 when I was sexually assaulted for the second time in my life. Shortly after the assault, I was diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Despite the diagnosis, I went on to be student government president, kept my grades up, and began speaking about my experiences as a sexual assault survivor. In March 2015, I received an email from the Assistant Dean of Students stating that I would be disciplined under university policy if I shared thoughts of self-harm or suicide with other students. The wording of this policy was ambiguous. I felt that I was being told to stop talking to others about my assault and the effect it had on me, as well as any other subject the administration felt might cast the university in a negative light. My university was imposing a gag order on many different students, including sexual assault survivors like myself. This gag order, imposed by university, made me feel alone at a time when I needed my friends most. I closed myself off from speaking to anybody for fear of retaliation. My grades suffered. In this difficult time, I reached out online to my friends and family through Facebook. I made a post discussing my sexual assault and my efforts to change NMU's policy. This post described my struggles as a sexual assault victim and a story about NMU's policy. All of this information was newsworthy, and indeed, such outlets as the New York Magazine and Huffington Post had covered my story. This eventually led to the U.S. Department of Justice investigation that resulted in NMU paying a fine and changing their policy as a part of a settlement. In the meantime, I received a message from Facebook less than 24 hours after I made my post. Facebook informed me that my post had been removed for violating their community standards for harassment. Because Facebook would not provide any further information, I can only speculate whether university officials had my post flagged for harassment or if it was some innocent mistake on Facebook's part. I do not know the information I shared. I do know that the information I shared on Facebook was well within the stated community guidelines. I had violated no policy. Nonetheless, it took nearly 3 weeks for the post to be reinstated. During the time when my name was in the news, I was unable to speak about the conduct of my university. Facebook never offered an explanation as to why my post was censored in the first place. After being silenced by my university, I was also silenced by Facebook. The second instance of censorship was very different, but just bizarre. In 2018, I taught students at Bothwell Middle School in Marquette, Michigan, as a part of my teacher training. I had planned lessons for my 8th grade students about the Holocaust. I had carefully selected materials and videos to supplement my lessons. While reading a novel on the Holocaust, I had planned to show some videos detailing what concentration camps looked like. Many of the students had told me that they could not picture what it would look like, and many of the students had not even heard of the Holocaust before. I had researched the video materials and chosen videos weeks ahead of time. Yet when it was time to play the videos on YouTube in my classroom, they had been removed. I tried finding other videos, but many of others had also been removed. It threw off the lesson plan that I had carefully selected. The message displayed on the videos was, "This account has been terminated due to multiple severe violations of YouTube's policy prohibiting free speech." I was left having to explain to my students what that meant and why the videos were gone. Instead of a learning experience for students based on the content of the videos, we had an impromptu discussion on what was happening before us. Many of the students were upset by YouTube's decision because they felt that it meant the Holocaust would be more likely to be forgotten. To be clear, the videos that I hoped to include had general information about the Holocaust, World War II Nazi propaganda, and relevant modern videos on racism. They were not hate speech. These were carefully selected educational videos. This experience has left me wondering how much of history will be erased in the quest to eliminate hatred. Hatred cannot be eliminated by censorship, but only by dialogue and discourse that needs to be allowed to continue. I would later find out that at least one creator of a similarly censored video, Mark Schulman, described YouTube censorship from his perspective. And this is in his Newsweek article. "This isn't about money. This video is not monetized, nothing earned from it. My website, historycentral.com, is explicitly designed to help middle and high school students learn history. I've taught students in both age groups, including teaching 8th graders about the Holocaust. The video in question is indeed a bit graphic. It contains a clip captured German archival films of actual mass killings of Jews by the Einsatzgruppen death squads. Despite the horror, this historic footage is not something high school students should be barred from viewing. I appealed the verdict using the 100-character form on YouTube videos. Within 3 hours, YouTube sent a response to their initial decision held. This episode raises a larger question about the dilemmas created by having two monopolies, an example, Google and Facebook, control the flow of information throughout the globe. They are far from the only problematic monopolies created during the last decade. But Google and Facebook are unique. They don't control commodities, they control information. And their founders still control their companies thanks to special voting rights their stocks provide. The power of Google and Facebook creates 3 sets of problems, and addressing one challenge often exacerbates the other. The first problem has now become the most well-known. The ability by some users to use these platforms to manipulate information, spread fake news, and influence elections. Russian use of social networks throughout the 2016 presidential election is well documented, and by all accounts successful. In the same vein, algorithms of both YouTube and Facebook, designed to keep users engaged on their platform by showing whatever appears to be of interest, has contributed to the radicalization of political views worldwide. The second problem is trying to fix these and other issues. Both Google and Facebook have taken control of censors-in-chief. They've taken it upon themselves to regulate social norms. Example that high schoolers should not be subjected to graphic images, including those of the Holocaust. They also act as gatekeepers to ensure that, as YouTube describes it, members of the protected class are not defamed or attacked by any of their videos. Along with societal judgment calls, YouTube works hard to truly remove dangerous videos like those produced by terrorists calling for attacks against potential targets. During one quarter of 2018 alone, YouTube removed 58 million videos. But how does a private for-profit company make such decisions? Beyond relying on AI, which has its own set of issues, Google has not retained a team of Harvard-trained scientists to review the posts. These decisions are made by subcontracted, overworked, and underpaid employees. These decisions raise the question of who sets the overarching guidelines. Did YouTube recruit a blue ribbon commission of the best and brightest philosophers and educators for the important tasks? No, these guidelines are set internally. In conclusion, internet censorship isn't just about political opinions or picking winners or losers in advertising and marketing. It affects ordinary people too. People that make videos to teach children, people that use the internet for personal enjoyment, and people that need to speak out about harm done to them. And a censored internet also has far less to offer their audiences. I support House Bill 4801 because it would require that social networks either honor the standard that they claim to uphold, to be neutral and not be censoring, or to admit their users that their platforms restrict speech. They should be required to honor their commitments to their users. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We appreciate it. At this time, opposing the bill is Carl Szabo from NetChoice, who wishes to speak.
Thank you very much. There we go. Cool. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Carl Szabo. I'm Vice President and General Counsel of NetChoice. We're a trade association that supports free enterprise and free speech online. I'm also an adjunct professor at George Mason's Antonin Scalia Law School. Just want to take a moment and kind of level set on what we're talking about here. Barnes & Noble sells books, obviously. And if there's a book that they're selling or have on their shelves that has libelous content or false content or defaming content, you would hold the author of that book accountable, not Barnes & Noble. That just makes sense. Barnes & Noble may decide, we don't want to carry the latest Bob Woodward book, or we want to switch over to be entirely nonfiction, or we only want to have Game of Thrones, and we'll change our names to Game of Thrones, the bookstore. And they can do that and still not assume liability for the content of the books that are on their shelves. That's exactly what we're talking about today. It's a 21st century platform, just like Barnes & Noble. Now, throughout the years, our country has struggled and attempted to regulate speech online, make sure that there's equal voices being heard at all times. Back in the 1960s, we had what is called the Fairness Doctrine. It required equal time for Democrats and Republicans. So if you're a TV station or radio station and you have some Republicans speak for 5 minutes, you must have a Democrat speak for 5 minutes, and vice versa. What ended up happening, actually, is you had less political content in news stories and less people coming up to speak because news agencies didn't want to spend 10 minutes of a 30-minute segment now trying to make sure both sides are balanced. And this went on for quite a while, went on till the 1980s, and Ronald Reagan's Federal Communications Commission decided that this was not a good policy for the country. The Republican-controlled FCC said it actually inhibits the presentation of controversial issues, this demand for fairness. President Reagan said this regulation is antagonistic to the freedom of expression guaranteed by the First Amendment. And that's what we're looking at again today, HB 4801. In the attempt to seek fairness, we are seeking to reimpose the Fairness Doctrine. At the same time, there are a number of constitutional infirmities in this bill, and it basically stems from the First Amendment. Let me give you an example. I'm a platform, and I come out and say, our site is for civil and public disclosures. And ISIS posts a video. Not a violent video, they just say, join ISIS to help the world. And I decide, you know what, I don't want ISIS on the site. And I kick them off. Did I declare myself to be a neutral platform? Did I violate HB 4801 by kicking them off because of their views? Probably. But because the term neutrality is so amorphous and so subject to the eye of the beholder, it's not going to pass constitutional muster. In order to survive a First Amendment challenge, you have to be a compelling government interest, narrowly tailored, and least restrictive. This bill fails all three prongs. There are also a number of unintended consequences that come down on this. And essentially, the best way to avoid liability under HB 4801 is to stop doing moderation whatsoever. It's pretty much the easiest way. As a lawyer who used to write terms of service and privacy policies for platforms like this, The way to avoid liability is say, you know what, I'm not going to engage in content moderation. Easiest way. But is that the outcome that we want? We are disincentivizing content moderation. To give you two quick examples of unintended consequences of this bill, let's presume I'm a website and I say, I'm open for all discussion and policy. I, Carl Szabo, am a dog lover. A cat lover wants to post a video. And the algorithms on the platform say, you know what, Carl loves dogs. He doesn't need to be bombarded by all these cat videos. Under the language of 4801, that cat video person has been shadow banned because all of their videos are not going to every single user. They're not necessarily going to Carl Szabo, the dog lover. Let me give you another example of an unintended consequence. Email spam blocking. Email service providers that hold themselves out to be neutral would be unable to block spam because they would be, quote unquote, shadow banning spammers. So that's another unintended consequence of this legislation. Now, the good news is the Michigan Consumer Protection Law today allows for enforcement against any business, online or offline, for violation of basically truthful acts, if they engage in unfair and deceptive trade practices. So if I make a statement that I'm going to be, any business that makes a promise and violates that promise, you can enforce against them today. So in essence, what worries me about this bill is it's violation of the First Amendment. It's injecting government into private contract and private business. It has unintended consequences that we will begin to see. And fortunately, it's unnecessary. So while this is an issue of important discussion, I don't think HB 4801 is the right way to address the concerns that we've heard.
That was really helpful. Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
testimony. Not wishing to speak and opposing the bill is Colleen Daly from Internet Association. Not wishing to speak and opposing the bill is Marissa Kovach from the ACLU of Michigan. And that's it. Thank you all for coming, and seeing no further business today, the House Communications Technology is adjourned.